The last 4 days we begin with Mr. Hubert Schwarzman. Today he will talk to us on sustainable pathways for blue-green innovation. So Hubert, please, the floor is yours.
My final session, I guess, today. I just realized that I made some adjustments to this final presentation, and I just realized that the title is not the correct one. It's about some notes and some thoughts with regard to blue and green economy. But I made some, as I said, I made some adjustments late last night, and then I thought maybe because we talked about this industry quite a bit this last week, and I thought it might be an interesting one before. Whereas the first slide is to say, okay, if I put the owner or the operator or charter of a vessel in the middle, who are the stakeholders? Because we said there are, it's a global industry, and there's a lot of different parties or organizations involved. So who are they? Who are all these stakeholders who are involved in the operation of a ship? And some of them are, you could say, involved on a daily basis, like, for instance, the managers of the vessel, and of course a crew, and pilots and tugs. They will, the pilots not on a daily basis, but they are, of course, when the ship is in operation. Whereas others, like sailors, well, you don't actually, you hope you will never get in touch with sailors because then you're in trouble. But they are also one of the stakeholders in this industry. My point here is look at the number of different stakeholders which, when we are talking about these industries, play a role. Why it is sometimes also quite difficult to get them aligned and to have everyone heading into the same direction. Okay. The question was, let's talk about the blue and the green economy. And when I thought about it, I thought it might be sensible to say, well, maybe then it's good to say what is a blue economy, and what is the green economy, and what are the differences, and what are maybe the similarities. The blue economy, let's start with that one, is that we use the ocean, seas and oceans, waterways, in a sustainable way for economic growth, for livelihood, improved livelihoods and jobs, but while we also preserve the health of this ocean ecosystem. In other words, yes, we use it because you could also say the seas and oceans are the working space of this industry, including, of course, ports and channels. But we should use it in a sustainable way. After all, when you have a workshop at home, you also make sure that it's cleaned every evening when you're done working. And so we should have a sort of same attitude when it comes to our seas and oceans. So instead of having things like a plastic soup in the Pacific and dumping all sort of garbage, we should really take care of it. Blue economy. So here another, and you can see that we have a number of different activities here which are linked to each other or which are the way we use it. So we use it for transport, but also, of course, a very important aspect of the blue economy is fishery, but also it's used for energy. We have, of course, offshore oil and gas. Nowadays, more and more we use it renewable energies, wind energies, and some projects are also underway where we use the ebb and flood tide for energy. But we also use the seas and oceans for tourism, like the beaches, but also sailing, yachting, and so on. As we are operating on these seas and oceans, we create waste, and so we have to deal with that. Now, of course, I mentioned it yesterday, it will come along today as well. We have one of the strongest, conventions of the IMO, which is called MARPOL, Maritime Pollution, and I will address it, which deals with all sorts of pollutions. But it's also something that is a mindset. We should be aware of it. Now then, let's have a look at the green economy. I think it's fair to say that the last half century, that sustainability has emerged as a critical imperative for every industry in every country. And so, even though we're still not there, it's already underway for quite some time. And what you see is that the maritime sector is no different. We are also have to deal with it. We have a vital role in global trade. 90% of global trade goes by sea, so we have a very important role in this you could say global economy, but also in national or regional economy, and we're depending on it, whether it is global trade, but also, I just mentioned it, fishery, which is also a very big part of the maritime industry. We need to have a more greener approach. And this green shipping, which is, you could say, is more a more detailed aspect of the green economy, is that we see how can we minimize the impact, how can we make sure that we continue our maritime operations, we continue our shipping activities and fishing activities, but on the other hand, we make sure that we paving the way, as it's stated here, for a more sustainable future. Where I think it was addressed yesterday in the final presentation, people, planet, and profit. And it should be balanced between these three. So it should not be only the people, only the planet, or maybe what is sometimes the most important, profit. No, it should be all three. Well, I think based on what we discussed this week, you wouldn't be surprised to say that what encompasses green economy, reduction of emissions, so looking for energy efficiency, as we discussed yesterday, making sure that air and water pollution is minimized, and making sure also for an ecological balance. Well, then you might say, is it truly sustainable? Of course, when you look at it and the way the operations today, you might say, well, there are some issues like we're burning heavy fuels, so that's maybe not such a good thing. So there are a lot of emissions. We have this noise, which can have an effect on this ecological balance. And we have something like a ballast water, which nowadays, of course, is arranged via the Ballast Water Management Convention. I don't have a slide of that, but there are, of course, some issues that can create this disturbances in the maritime and the marine ecosystem. But on the other hand, the industry itself, IMO, and also some more regional initiatives, and regional rules and regulations are are aiming to create a reduction of emissions, to create a more sustainable future. On the other hand, making sure that we will continue the maritime operation, shipping, fishery, and so on. So we have a strategy which has, of course, as the main goal, zero emissions by 2050. In that respect, we have a number of indexes created, the existing and the design index, and also the carbon intensity indicator. And in order to at least first a real good understand, okay, then how big is that impact, and then further on to minimize it. As we also discussed yesterday, then of course there are some technological advancements on the way. We can have a look at the design of the vessel in order to minimize the energy consumption, fuel consumption. We can look at different propulsion systems, not only hybrid and electric, but maybe at later stages moving on to ethanol, hydrogen, maybe even ammonia, maybe even nuclear. We can have routing and navigation technology, see if we can improve our deviate in order to avoid bad weather, or and so even though the route might be a little bit longer, but it can be more efficient. And of course, the energy management on board the vessel as a whole. You can make ships more available if you zoom in on the ship alone by a number of initiatives. I think the final one, number 5, is also collaboration. So it means also that collecting data, but it means also that the organization ashore, whether that is a head office or country offices, the crew on board, cargo owners and operators, charters, they all should be involved in such an operation. Otherwise, if you're not on the same track, with the same goal, then it might be a more difficult thing. But it is, I think I used the term already a few times. Of course, it is a sort of a transition, which will last at least another couple of years, if not decades. And that will include a number of things. Maybe you could say it starts with a policy and regulatory framework. You need to have a sort of solid foundation or fundamental base, where you say, okay, it's based, what are we going to do? It's based on a number of regulations, codes, conventions, but also a policy framework. So via an IMO or via maybe some regional rules and regulations. For instance, there's a number of initiatives also taken by European Union, maybe in other areas as well. And then work on that as an industry with alternative fuels, emission reductions, as we also mentioned yesterday. There are other needs. Looking for new energy sources, technological advancements, but certainly also. So remember the first slide I showed you, collaboration within the industry. Then if you look at the ports, of course we see a number of initiatives and steps taken by ports and terminals where they are also working on having a more green and sustainable operation. But should be aware, of course, that it involves huge investments, and so that there is always, of course, the need to make sure that before you do these initiatives, that there is a solid return on investments. Well, I think these, certainly for those guys here who are in the port industry, electrification of port equipment, also maybe alternative fuels to provide energy, and a more smarter grid, maybe some issues like better organizations in order to avoid high peak activities, but also again, number 5, you need to have your government, port authorities, and along, and also regulatory support. But of course, as it comes with all these sort of things, you need to check whether it is, at the end of the day, economically feasible to make these sort of transitions solid and make sure that it is possible to support this green logistic transition. Going even one step further, when you look at, so we have the ship, we have the port, but as you say, okay, now let's have a look at the supply chain perspective. Then, of course, it becomes even more stakeholders involved. So then you need even further look at it and say, can I create a sort of situation where the port operations, but also maybe the hinterland connections, so further into distribution to final destinations, but also the pre-transport, so towards the port, that everyone in such an operation is integrated for a more sustainable supply chain. And then I think they were also mentioned yesterday, definitely of these sustainable development goals come into play. And even more, you can imagine that when you take this broader approach, again, cooperation, collaboration is vital. Just a quick look at a green ship. As I already said yesterday, I think there's more than just than only to look at alternative fuels. There are a wide array of opportunities and possibilities, technologies on board a vessel where you can gain energy solutions, energy efficiency, which makes it more better operational, better operated, and create an energy efficiency. So that can be in the power and propulsion systems, different alternative fuels, but also voyage optimization, speed. As I said, for instance, the example of east-west trades, instead of going at a very high speed, leaving Asia towards Europe, you can also at a lower speed and then maintain that speed, and you will arrive in the same time. So there's a lot of options here, and not only fuels. You can go even a step further, and here are, as we've shown earlier this week, there's also the option of wind assistance to create a more energy efficient ship. But again, it comes at a cost, and also it has an impact on the, of course, the loading and discharge operation of the vessel. Part of green shipping is not only is energy efficiency, but it's also in circularity. So instead of creating a lot of waste, we can see where can we use that and reuse materials. For instance, an example it is in a very early stage. One of the things, of course, where you can, which is a rather new technology, is the carbon capture and delivering the CO2s in a port, which then in a sort of chemical process will be reused. Don't ask me exactly how that works because it's quite a complex chemical process, and I'm certainly not a chemist, but I know that these are issues underway in order to sort of reuse the captured CO2. Same is applicable for ship design. That when a ship comes at the end of its life, 20-25 years on average, to reuse all the different materials. So all the different materials of this ship can then be reused for new build instead of throwing it away. As I said, the sustainable use of ocean resources and economic growth, that is what we think is the blue economy with an improved livelihood and to maintain a healthy ocean ecosystem. We as shipping industry are playing a central, if you could say a little bit, a double-edged role. Driver of ocean-based trade, but also we have a really true impact on the environment. So we are 80-90%, at least a very large share of global trade in volume is by sea. It's a little less when it comes to from a financial point of view. I think it's about 65-70%. When you have shipping, you have ports. There is a marine logistics operation as well, which comes with all sort of different segments. So we have shipbuilding, we have port operations, we have an offshore industry, whether it is oil and gas, but more and more also offshore wind. And we have, of course, the fishery I already mentioned there. It's not only because this global trade, because there is a very high demand for all sort of materials and raw materials and all sort of finished goods. But of course it's also, when you look at remote islands, it's the only way to provide these islands with their, you could say, daily needs. So for them, shipping is a very important and, you could say, essential element. For them, you can imagine that all these islands, for instance, in the Pacific, without ships, it becomes a difficult way to live there. But 3% of our global emissions, and a lot of unfortunately, still maritime marine pollution. But there is some progress. There are some things underway. As discussed this week, so in that sense, I think you could say, yeah, this is the real issues that we should look at altogether. IMO targets, options like a European trading scheme for emissions, early alternative fuels. Offshore power systems called ironing, OPS, ballast water management conventions is now widely enforced, and that's a thing that's very strict these days. We're getting more and more. Improvement in the ship design. Ship design is a never-ending story. It always goes on and on in order to find better designs which are more efficient. But also the Hong Kong Convention, which, as you can see, was finally into force in 2005. Bear in mind, it was, I think, signed in 2009 and 2011. It took us 40 years to have something in place. And of course, there are these ocean governments' participation. This was also shown yesterday in the final presentation with UNCTAD and the Sustainable Development Goals. There is this US Sustainable Goal 14, and shipping is being aligned with life below water goals. Some other examples and initiatives that are on the way, mostly which start with the United Nations, and finally, as we spoke about yesterday, the green shipping corridors, like the ones we discussed yesterday between Singapore and Rotterdam, and Shanghai and Los Angeles, as well as in Norway, as well as between, I think it was Australia, China and Japan, to make more sustainable trade routes. But as we also discussed yesterday, they are in very early stages. Well, yeah, that's one of the things. The IMO does provide, of course, with sustainable development goals, does provide us a number of goals that we would like to fulfill. Also provides us a number of codes and conventions, but it's much more complex to make sure that someone is also overseeing it and is able to force parties to do the right thing as is required. I know that, but I'm not sure whether it was mentioned yesterday by our legal expert, is that UNCLOS does have there is a court, I think it's not sure whether it's in Switzerland, but there is a court which is when you have a dispute regarding UNCLOS, United Nations Convention for Law of the Sea. But it is very, I know of a few cases, it takes years and years to finalize and to settle these disputes. And one of the reasons is that these sort of disputes are always international, and then of course it starts with the sometimes very difficult question, which national law is applicable. True, there is uneven access to green technology. This sort of imbalance, uneven situation, which we have well, we are aware of it, and so that makes it certainly for a number of parts of the world more complex than for us. Another very, I think, a familiar thing is, as I said, planet, profit, and people. The economic pressure often outweighs the ecological priorities. So, there's those who are saying the economic value, the economic rationale will prevail. But I think we are aware of it. I don't have a sort of straight answer to say how to deal with it, but we know that the economic, so you could say the profit versus the planet is always something that needs to be considered. Of course, when there is one day, or maybe the largest economy in the world says, no, there is no climate change, well, yeah, then it can be a little bit tougher, so to say. Yeah, there's also whether we should have shipping lanes, or whether we should say it's an area that needs to be protected and that needs to be conserved. So, the spatial planning, they will say the oceans are quite large, but still, for instance, the discussion is if you take the northern route, so instead of going from Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong via straight Malacca into the Indian Ocean, up along the Red Sea, Mediterranean, and up north to Europe. There's also the possibility to go north of Russia, the North Pole, and the Arctic area, which is a much shorter route. You don't have a Suez Canal passage. As we've seen yesterday, the Indian Ocean is quite well, an intriguing, let's put it that way, intriguing area at the moment. With a number of choke points, Sri Lanka, Red Sea, which nowadays is not a very desirable part of the route, and also Suez Canal, which is a very costly passage. So you could say I'll go by the north, but the fact that it is possible is also an indication that somehow the ice is melting. So should we stay away from that and do not go that route? So apart from the conflict between shipping lanes and conservation areas, there's also this climate issue that comes into play. Despite these sort of economics of people, planet, profit, I believe that the marine protection laws will be stricter and will be more in order to make sure that this balance somehow will be achieved. But it comes, of course, with substantial investment. And we need, of course, funding, not only public, but I think private, so that it should be a public-private ambition. Yeah, so you have a natural capital, and so there needs to be a sort of, okay, we have the shipping which impacts and we need to figure out by assessments whether the impact and the effects on natural capital are in balance. So, trade policies, well, will likely include so these organizations will likely include biodiversity, carbon, and circularity metrics. I think the IMO, I know the IMO is delivering results. I have to be a little bit careful, but sometimes I'm not sure the effect of the WTO always is sufficient in this matter. But anyway, they will include it, and so that creates also a governmental, could say, foundation for further improvements. We are in early stages, but I think it's fair to say that we are beginning to align, and that we are making steps towards a better, sort of more greener and bluer economy. And that there are green technologies that there are better governance frameworks, and that we are more and more committed to marine stewardship. It will not be an easy road. There will be certainly a bumpy every now and then, but I think whether 2050 will be indeed zero emission, we will see. At least I think it's good to have that aim, to have that goal, and then we'll see how we progress. People, planet, profit, economic, environmental, social, another way to describe it. Global shipping contributes to each of them. And you could also see that we do have, of course, a very strong support in an economic way. Significant work is still needed in the other two. But again, we are underway. I already said that it's sustainable development without degrading the green economy, degrading the environment. So then it comes, what you could say, not so much the oceans, but more the system itself. So low carbon, resource efficient in all sectors. The green economy includes not only shipping, but also, of course, agriculture, transport, buildings, industry. Do no harm to the environment while achieving economic growth. Well, when we look at our own business, you can say methanol fueled ships, which of course are very little. We showed you that yesterday. But there are a few examples. Maersk has a green methanol ship, maybe more. I think CMA has one or two. Evergreen is working on them. Then, of course, we have the LNG powered vessels, not only the LNG tankers, but also others. There are some very, very early trials, hydrogen and ammonia, and as I said, marine propulsion is there as well. Also, already discussed, we have lubrication systems, slow steaming, but also on board the vessel you can switch to LED lighting and energy resources and other systems on board to have a more efficient energy use, and of course the whole coatings and cleaning of the underwater hull in order to have less drag. Onshore OPS, onshore power supply, electrification, and also a digitalization, so a better administrative system which creates an efficient rolling maneuver. We've seen this already also. Some shipping lines are now working with AI for route optimization and also fuel efficiency. Of course, that comes with a very high level of sensors, as you can see, number two, and I also think Dr. Mubarak mentioned this, the use of IoT to improve the performance. So in ship, it can also be, of course, in the whole supply chain. Also, voyage planning software. Recyclable materials, so when the ship comes to life, use these materials for new ships or in other means or other activities. Modular components, which makes it easier, for instance, for retrofitting or repair. The life cycle emissions, so we have a number of these indexes, but make sure that you have a very good overview of the emissions during the vessel design phase. So make sure that they can be limited. And again, these building ships to this energy efficiency design index. So we have the XI, which is for existing ships, but for new ships, you have to already make an energy efficiency design index in the design and building stages. The Hong Kong Convention, very important to make sure that the recycling or the some call it the scrapping of the vessels, when they are scrapped. Again, the Hong Kong Convention is also not only the planet but also the people with the profit, which means that also the working conditions for those who are recycling their ships, scrapping their ships, so that they are working according normal working and labor standards. As also yesterday, I think Dr. Mubarak mentioned about the working conditions at sea. The same applies, of course, for recycling. That's also in the Hong Kong Convention. Recycling as certified green yards is a safe, environmentally sound methods. Make sure that the materials that come out of the recycling process can be reused. Now, a number of examples. We mentioned the trading scheme of emissions. There are also some, I think, which are more related to land transport as offsets for carbon emissions, so reducing it by yourself, and which I also discussed yesterday, Poseidon principles and Sea Carbon Charter, which is Poseidon principles related to the financing. So in order to have your financing in place, you have to make sure that the investment is according to these Poseidon principles. If you want to work with the parties who signed these principles, which is not entirely sure the number of parties involved, but it is it's an international group of banks and investors who signed these principles. So it's not a single solution. It's not green economy, green shipping. It's not just sort of a single idea, but it's technologies, practices, and regulations with these clear goals that we discussed this week: reduce waste, improve resource efficiency, and decarbonize the industry, without giving up the global trade. So we want to maintain global trade. What we don't want is there are some in the world who think we have to minimize, but to have a sort of not only economic growth, but economic, going downward. That is not the case. That's not what we aim for. We need to have, we know that we have economic growth. We want to keep the global trade flowing. We want to maintain our business, but we need to do it in another, you could say, more sensible, more sustainable way. Aftershock, blue economy discussion. Of the green economy, focus still on sustainable use of ocean. So first there was the green economy, then there was the blue economy. So the blue economy came actually after already the green economy was established, because it's also about ocean ecosystem health. I think we discussed this. The blue economy shipping, so again, that is economic development all while protecting the health of oceans and ecosystems. Maybe some examples. Of course, ballast water treatment in order to not to disturb the bio system in one place because you take ballast water in port A and you ship all the way across the ocean, and then you discharge or you unload your ballast water. Then of course that water with all the sediments and everything that's in it is then disturbing the biosystem in the other places. So that's why there is a very clear set of rules, ballast water treatment system. This propeller optimization not only to have a more efficient, fuel efficient ship, but also to reduce noise. And anchor damage to seabeds. Make sure that all this underwater seabeds and coral reefs and so are not disturbed and not damaged. I think they will sink the former cruise passenger vessel, the USS United States. They will sink it, which will then become sort of start for new biosystems. This is the ballast water damage management convention. There are two stages, D1 and D2 are two sectors. And it started already in 2017, but now I think in 2024, as you can see, by next month, all ships must meet the standard D2. And so that means that you have to be fully compliant with the ballast water management convention. Of course, another example is MARPOL, pollution prevention. Also, we have these sort of low sulfur emission zones. I think the North Sea part of the English Channel is a low sulfur zone, which means when you enter the zone with your vessel, you either use a scrubber to reduce your emissions, or you are using no longer heavy fuel oil with gas oil, also to reduce your emissions. And your waste management systems to reduce plastics into the ocean. Instead of throwing it overboard, keep it on board a vessel and then make sure that it's properly handed over to the port where you enter. This is MARPOL, which consists of a number of annexes, which provide you with rules and regulations for specific types of pollution, oil, noxious and liquid substances, harmful substances, sewage, garbage, and air. So covering the whole spectrum. Use low sulfur fuels, and of course go directly offshore power. Establishing feeder shipping lines, so using smaller ships in direct lines with a global trade network. So you have some sort of hub and spoke network set up that can have more. So you can use smaller ships, more fixed for the jobs instead of sometimes large ships or ships that are half full. And for these sort of back and forth trades, and as I told you yesterday, when you use ships, for instance, on ethanol, hydrogen, it's much easier for the fuel battery. And there are, I don't have exact examples of it, but I know that there are a number of these conservation initiatives taken, which will again help us obtain a more blue economy. As yesterday also discussed, green corridors will help you in order to create a more sustainable shipping process the ecosystem impact. So here you can see there is, when you talk about the shipping cycle, there's of course, this is the economic way to say how it works. So when there is, it depends a little bit where you want to start. You could say, okay, new vessels are delivered. So let's say at 3 o'clock, new ships are delivered. Then we have a larger supply of vessels. They exceed demand. Then you see a decrease in spot markets. Then we are going to see that vessels will decline in value. We start to vessels laid up. We see some charters going into default. And of course, there are also financial issues. And then it goes up. And then we say, all right, now we need more ships. So we start to order ships. Ships that are no longer economically viable will be scrapped. And we see that the supply demand comes more into balance. But then, of course, there are and ships will increase. Again, financial, so IPO market and bond market will open and new ships will be delivered. Now that's what is going constantly, these sort of cycles, going up, going down, going up. And the whole thing is for ship owners and charterers is to find a sort of balance situation. It's certainly a business for sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But more from say the actual or the operational is construction, operation, maybe retrofitting and the life. That's I think the ship life cycle, and of course nowadays when there is the end of life, it is interesting to see apart from raw materials in the manufacturing, we also would like to see this circular aspect. So when the ship is at the end of its life, her life, see if we can reuse these materials. So the blue economy aims for, or focuses on, to have minimal ecological footprint, resilience, that was a term I think used several times this week, of coastal areas, but also the ocean itself, and ensure the long-term viability of our ocean resources. I thought it might be also sensible to say what is green versus blue. So the green economy is the overarching umbrella of sustainable development. So green covers everything, not only the seas and oceans, but the whole planet. Whereas the blue is the green focus and green focused application of green economy principles. Both aim to align people, planet, and profit. Sort of, yes, this is a sort of table that you see that these differences summed up. Thank you, that was my explanation of green and blue, and I think that we can conclude that we discussed these two economies. We had a look at green corridors and decarbonization. We discussed what the challenges and developments. Actually, on Tuesday, sorry again, I somehow missed that one. But on Tuesday, I had some slides with regard to port operations and management. But then I thought, I know for a few participants here who probably have much more knowledge about port operations and management than I do. So, but it will be, I will provide the slides to Dr. Asif so that they will be made available to you, like all the others. So I think that the main conclusion of these presentations is that I think that the best is to say indeed the goal or the aim for the homework for the coming years is indeed is to seek this balance between people, plan, and profit in our industry. It's quite clear we need the shipping every single day, but we also need to make sure that we take care of the people who are working in the industry, maybe a lot of people as well as preserve our planet for the next generations. Thank you.
Okay, the floor is now open for question and answers.
Sir, as we are talking about green energy, which is expensive than normal energy we are using, it will also increase the cost of freight, and that will increase the cost of the product. Then how the authorities are looking into it?
How?
Authorities that they are resisting green economy and green energies, how they are looking into it?
That's a good question. When we are going to use other fuels, the expected expectations these days, of course, that they are more expensive. So that when costs increase, then it will be charged finally to the consumer. Somehow these costs will be charged to the shippers. When you look at trade. On the other hand, you could say if we will use more and more of hydrogen and more methanol, or whatever the future fuel will be, the fuel of the future, maybe I should use that word, then it's also likely that the cost will go down. But it's you could also say, okay, we stick to fossil fuel, but that's probably not the option. So I think that that's why cooperation and collaboration is important. But also we are aware of that there are different ambitions, or different views, or different needs. Yes, costs will probably rise first, and then hopefully they will flat out. But I think that's not something new. It's the same with, for instance, because now, like we've seen surcharges for fossil fuels in history. We've also I've been in chartering for a number of years, and I remember that when I started, the rates of the vessel were, let's say, 100, and within 2 years' time it was 200. Or I'll give you another example. In 2008, the Baltic Dry Index, which is sort of index for bulk trade around the globe, which is a global index. The Baltic Dry Index was 2,500. Then we had the financial crisis in 2000. No, it was sorry. Before the financial crisis, it was 2,000. Then it came better. And at some stage it was at 12,000. And some charters in, for instance, bulk carriers were celebrating every deal they made, because every deal was better than the deal before. And then in 2007-8 it was 12,000, and within 9 months it collapsed from 12,000 to 2,000, or even less, 1,500. Which meant there were people in this business who, let's say on January 1st, were making for a vessel, I don't know, $150,000 a day for a vessel, and within 9 months it was 15,000. They were out of business within So it is one of the things of shipping is it is a very volatile, very competitive industry. So, and history tells us that, yeah, that will be the case, I think, also. By the way, if you look at some of those indexes of real long time back in history, you will see that it is, sometimes it's up there, but often it's like here. So it will be tough. And I fully agree, it is a thing. Yeah. We have to move on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As we discussed about green and blue economy, there is also a concept of red economy. Sorry, innovation, red innovation. So how do you integrate that with red innovation of economy with blue and green in the maritime system?
Not sure whether we got it.
Yes.
Red.
Red innovation.
So apart from green, blue, we have red.
So there's a red, currently there's a red innovation. In the context of red innovation, how do you see blue and green economies?
Red.
Red innovation. Innovation.
I have. I'll be very honest with you. I have no idea. I'm very interested in to hear what the red.
What the red economy says?
Yeah.
Would you like?
Well, yeah. Well. Yeah.
Would you? No.
Well, we get a coffee break. We can. I'm going to sit next to you. I would like to know the red information. Please.
Red innovation economy.
Wow.
Okay. So do you have any more questions from the House?
So, what is the key difference between D1 and D2 plastic?
Oh, these are different standards, and I think it increases the more strict. Let me look.
I asked him to.
Oh.
So we just do it. Okay, so it's on yours.
On the final slides, or okay. Very small. So as you can see, D2, these are two standards. So D1, as I said, is standard requiring ships to exchange ballast water in open seas, away from coastal areas. So few organisms. So D1, which was, that's where it started, was where you can exchange ballast water in open sea. I think 3 or 4 miles from the coast, maybe more, but I think it's whereas D2, it goes further. It says it's very specified with regard to the amount of organisms allowed to be discharged. So it's a higher standard. So first it was only D1, or a number of ships was D1. I don't know exactly, but it's the number of ships were on D1, and then existing ships, and then new ships. So there was a sort of path that says, okay, existing ships only in D1, and then new ships in D2, and then also existing ships in D2. And that's how it's arranged. And the good thing is that all these sort of conventions are, if you Google, you can find them. They're easy to access. So they're not behind all sort of what is it, walls. They are easy to find. And actually, what I always tell students in Amsterdam, in order to understand conventions, is so I provide them and I say you have to read them. Otherwise, you'll never understand what's in it, and never know how to use it. Certainly when you're at sea. Thank you.
For your talk. Since we still have time before we break for tea, we will move our next talker, the post-tea talk, to this time slot. And we will request Mr. Fassi Haider, COO, Dubai Port Buzz. I would like to read his credentials first, please. Mr. Fassi Haider is the Chief Operating Officer of Qasim International Container Terminal, a DP World subsidiary, where he oversees operations, engineering, and commercial functions. With over 30 years of global experience across Nigeria, Morocco, Denmark, the US, Singapore, and Pakistan, he is a proven expert in process standardization, continuous improvement, and digital transformations. Mr. Fassi holds an MBA in Management Information Systems and completed AP Moller Group prestigious MISE and Magnum programs, as well as DP World Institute's MTO and TVM courses. Under his leadership, QICT has enhanced capacity, implemented lean methodologies, and rolled out cutting-edge IT and automation solutions, positioning the terminal as a regional frontrunner in efficiency and service excellence. So we are very honored to have this very distinguished guest with us, and I will now request Mr. Fassi Haider, COO, Dubai Port Buzz, sir, to please take us through your journey.